In December of 2011, I was in a group call on Skype into which Felida the Geek was brought. We were of course aware of each other and been sub to each other for some time, but had never spoken before directly. I was somewhat flattered by her attention, her being something of a famous YouTuber. It was not long before we engaged in an online sexual relationship, which included friendship, and soon we were together. It was Felida's idea that we'd become exclusive, and we were a couple within a few weeks. I am not really a relationship person, and have had very few serious long-term relationships. I was not really looking. This just kind of happened. Of course, you may know Felida is a dom, and pieced it together that I am a sub. I will not be dwelling on BDSM much in these pages, I see no point, but it played a part in how we came together, if you see what I mean. I also sometimes can't sleep, and hate waking up in the dark, and she used to sing me to sleep. That and New Year's Eve together on Skype was pretty good, and we had two, of course, with the 1 hour time difference. I actually blew off 2 real-life parties in favour of spending the night with her. I know that sounds sad, but it felt right at the time. It also became the beginning of our watching films and TV shows together. I did my best, as I always attempt, to explain some important things about myself. For one, the obsessive-compulsive disorder from which I suffer, which is pretty severe and has been debilitating in some parts of my life. One of the reasons for the existence of this memoir is that my mind cannot process information efficiently. Not because I obsess over details and events, not simply because I obsess over details and events, but mainly because I get caught in loops when trying to understand things. My mind is made of loops, with a backlog of loops, to which I am yet to come. Some people say it's like the mind is chewing gum instead of consuming food. Others say it's like a malfunctioning computer. To use a science fiction analogy, those of you familiar with Star Trek Voyager may recall the episode where the emergency medical hologram cannot face a paradox and relives the thoughts, feelings and events over and over. This is normal life if you were me, and has been for as long as I remember, long before a diagnosis. I got Felida to watch the film Dirty Filthy Love, so that she might gain a greater understanding of what living with OCD is actually like. Like repeating myself, for example, which is a symptom beyond my control. And love means you accept these things. I did also try to explain that my emotional development arrested at 13. I was not firm enough with Felida about taking things slowly or being discreet. It was my own fault. I was not firm about what I wanted or needed. These things are significant given my initial perception of Felida, that she was strong, stable, practical, mature, patient, nurturing and perhaps even maternal. My perception may have been a little off. This is not to say that I don't want to be there for people who have their own issues. I do try, but I call that friendship. I was aware of her history of depression, but she seemed okay at the time, and I figured I would be strong enough if she needed me to be. Now, the strongest of people would find it upsetting for their children to be taken away from them, and of course I was shocked and possibly angry on her behalf. She had described herself as a messy before, but I did not know how depressed she had been, or that she suffered agoraphobia. It was all quite an emotional blur, and everything happened very quickly. On a side note, using something like that as a weapon against someone, whatever you may think of them, or whatever they have or have not done in the past, is not cool. Equally, being nasty to someone who has mental problems doesn't solve anything. It is also fair to say that when you dedicate your life to harassing, intimidating and defaming an enemy from your past, it is you that you are hurting more than anyone. This comes from an OCD sufferer who lives in the past, can build new memories of course, but never losing the old ones at all. As if time is not linear for me. One day I will simply crash under the weight of decades of memory which cannot die. And yet, it is me of all people who says, for fuck's sake, just let go. I would also like to make it absolutely clear that when I meet someone, I don't accept a review of them stapled to them. So what I am about to say is about my own perceptions, and warning signs that I myself observed and chose to ignore, just as Felida at the time seemed very quickly and phonetically infatuated with me, and I do not think she heard everything I said. This may simply be due to her lack of concentration. We had things called elephants, named for a small teapot that was on my desk at the time, that has an elephant on it. I tend to name things like that. Believe it or not, I could be under the impression an entire two-way conversation had occurred, even that plans had been agreed on, only to find out no such conversation had happened. The best example of an elephant was when I told Felida how whiskey is made. They took a massive blender, you see. They take a massive blender, you see, and hurl dozens and dozens of live monkeys into it. I used to act out the screaming of the monkeys as they flew it. And all the ingredients, the flesh, the bone, the hair, etc., is ground and then poured through a sieve, so there isn't any nasty gristle. And the result is a rather tasty scotch, but better if you leave it to mature. For vodka, it is basically the same, only you need baboons, of course, but I expect you assumed that. The response to all this was, yeah, and so on. Hours later, before we said goodnight, I told her that I'd said all this, and what her reaction had been. She actually screamed incredulously, and then went into a kind of denial and eventually believed it all. In terms of our communication problems throughout our 6 months relationship, this story is absolutely nothing. Before I forget, there is something that has always bothered me. While towards the end of our relationship, Felida had said that she just has to be in a relationship, hates being single. In the early days, however, she had said that she had sworn off relationships for good and would never love again until me. Oddly, this is exactly how I truly felt, the latter I mean, but in Felida's case, these things cannot both be true. It's possible I mentioned it, forgot, and then she used my own words on me. As I say, things were a confusing blur at the beginning. But I digress. What I mean to come to is that while CPS taking the kids away was simply a tragic event, if something of a wake-up call that may, in the long run, have benefited Felida, and the mess and her illness, physical and otherwise, and I can certainly vouch for her physical illnesses being totally real, did not make her a bad person. There is something that should have bothered me. You see, she had already bought her Ryanair ticket to come to England to see me across the week of my birthday. Felida had a lot of tidying and cleaning to do before she could get her children back. A Ryanair fare from Germany to England and back is only around 30 quid. It was me that said not to worry, she could see me later, or I could visit her, although there was presumably a reason why I couldn't fly to her straight away. I forget what that would be. But ideally, if needed, I could go there, maybe even help with the house. Felida would not wait any longer to see her new love, and insisted she go ahead and visit. I'm not complaining, it was my birthday, I spent it with my girlfriend. She handmade me a book in the shape of a TARDIS, like the one River has, and a lot of our time together was fun. It was that nagging feeling, though, while Felida needed and deserved cheering up, and I appreciated her company, I, a boyfriend of 1 month, should not have been prioritised over somebody's children. I have been with a single mother before, and I think I know how it works.